You're listening to the On Your Mark podcast, a space for honest conversations with the school system leaders shaping what's possible for early readers. From high-impact tutoring to building trust with families and teens, we dig into what it really takes to make early literacy work for all kids. Welcome to the On Your Mark podcast. I am your host, Mindy Sjoblom, and I am excited to be joined today by Dr. Edie Sohigian, Executive Director of Elementary School Education for Sampson County Schools in North Carolina. Welcome, Edie. It's so nice to see you this afternoon for you, I think. For me, it's this morning. I'm excited to start by just learning a little bit more about you. Tell us about your journey to your role right now in Sampson County Schools.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's quite an honor to be able to come and talk about the things I'm passionate about. So I actually was born and raised in New England, via upstate New York, and then I moved to Florida. So who would ever know? And so when I was in Florida, I started in Osceola County. I worked for the state of Florida, supporting, evaluating underperforming schools, getting them to help them raise their letter grade. But then I became an administrator in Orange County, Florida, which has about, 12,000 kids, maybe more at this point. So very, very large school district. I was a district level administrator for a couple of learning communities there. Just a very unique situation. Got to know a lot of people and had a lot of great experiences. I had a job opportunity to be the director of teaching and learning in Kentucky. So I went up there and I did that for a couple of years. And then I had another job opportunity and I came here to Sampson County. Really wanted to slow my pace. If you know anything about Orlando, just lots and lots of traffic. So then my transition to Kentucky is better. And now I'm in a very rural district, Sampson County. I am, like you said, the executive director. So I lead 9 principals, but wear a myriad of hats. Because in Orlando, that was like my only position, was supporting those principals. And now I'm doing it all. But extremely, I don't mean to say but, and it is extremely rewarding work. And I've gotten to meet some amazing people in the process.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for telling us a little bit about that path so far. I'm really curious to dig in a little bit more around the differences that you've experienced working in major urban districts, and then also coming into what you've described as that draw towards just a different pace. And well, what does that mean, especially for you as a leader now of 9 principals and taking on wearing lots of other hats? What are some of the similarities and differences you found between the urban and rural settings?
So people are people, and everybody wants that relationship and connection. So it's always going to start there no matter what. It's maybe easier to make those connections in the more rural area because everyone knows everyone, and you get a chance to have those conversations more fluidly, more frequently with people than in the urban district. Difference in the urban district is there's a little bit more funding going around. So people have greater access to things like professional development and high quality instructional resources, and exposure to those things. People here in Sampson County, when they get to experience those things, are so very grateful and absorbing all of the information because they don't necessarily get that all the time, if that makes sense. So definitely resources are a thing that we think about a lot.
It's something that I've really been, scratching my head about a bunch lately. In my work, I get to work with schools in both urban and rural settings, and that resource divide is very real. And I also, at the same time, I'm like, but the number of kids isn't that different. So what is the what's the reason behind the resource divide? And is it just financial? Is it people resources? Like, did they break that down for us a little bit more?
Yeah, so it is all of the resources in terms of like tangible things, digital stuff, and human resources. So like I said, I wear a myriad of hats. So I'm not just the executive director over the principals. I also am in charge of teaching and learning. So I do a lot of work with our coaches here. Um, Luckily, our superintendent is a visionary and he knows the importance of an instructional coach in a school. So when he started here, that was what one of his first things that he did was make sure that there was an instructional coach in every elementary school. So it took some getting because of those financial ties, right? And so that was a process. But we have the most amazing coaches who are willing and ready to dive into anything. So in the bigger setting at each school, there's 3, sometimes 4 coaches in an elementary school. Um,
Wow.
and especially those that are struggling get more resources.
Yep.
So here it's pretty equitable across the board in terms of the human resources at the schools. What I don't have at the district level are those people that additionally go out to schools and provide that support. It is just me. I'm a lone soldier. Um, so those coaches come in really handy when we're trying to build district initiatives and things like that. They are the most amazing human beings, never mind educators. And they really work together very collaboratively to get the job done, or else we wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah. Do you, and this speaks to my heart too, because my first role outside of a classroom was as a coach, and kind of seen how powerful those kind of relationships can be to really move the needle for kids and for teacher improvement over time. Do you work directly with the coaches and give them guidance, or is that run through the principals? Like, how does that structure work for y'all at Sampson?
Yes, so I do that directly. So they are pulled from their schools a couple times a month. I'm actually in a room right now where they're coming this afternoon. We had a
Yay.
morning session and afternoon. And so they get direct support from me. Part of that each time is talking about a problem of practice they have, so that they can do that collaborative piece. A lot of them have very similar things going on in their schools, and so they benefit from that conversation. But yeah, it's me running the show. So the thing about that is there's good and bad things because I can make some decisions and I don't have to, there's not a lot of back channel conversation. You can do that. But the key is there that it is so very important to get everybody's voice in that decision making process. So having direct access to coaches helps with that a tremendous amount. They have direct access to teachers. So I'm able to really have touch points at all levels of the organization in a really pretty easy way. And that way we work together to get that. I don't like that term buy-in. I don't like it. I really talk pretty deeply about the why that we're doing things, to talk to especially teachers who are in it every day and are the most passionate people. And I think that it's a person, not a program, that really makes it happen anyway. Um, so getting their voice is just essential. But yeah, the collaboration. I have not found a better way to collaborate with people in the larger district. And you don't want that finger pointing. It's the district. It's the district. And so when we bring people together, give them that voice, um, building that collective efficacy with people, I think that brings about transformational change rather than telling people what to do. That makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just wrote down it's person, not a program, because I think that's a really important note to take away from what you just said. And I can imagine the challenges in a large district of so many different layers of leadership and decision making that it's a lot harder to actually move and get things done too, right? But you extend out into lots of different spaces, so in a way, creating that coherence has probably got to be a lot more streamlined.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said, the collaboration's so good that it does feel like it's coming from one voice. We also work from a strength perspective. So we're trying to find those celebrations. We're trying to find teachers that are doing great things, videotape them, share it with others. We do that through an instructional playbook. Again, that adds the layer of coherence throughout the district. So everybody's speaking the same language. So, in the terms of literacy, I have found that that has been really important because there's different struggles at every level. Even within elementary, you have your primary literacy, then you have that 2, 3 transition piece, and then you're really working on comprehension in fourth and fifth. So what does that look like at each level? So we do a lot of vertical planning within our playbook. We make sure that every teacher has access to the grade before them and the grade below them so they can see what those expectations are. My coaches have extensive conversations with teachers about the standards so that they have that really, really deep knowledge and understanding. Part of our playbook is utilizing backwards design. And so we start with standard every time. And then we work backwards from there, making sure our assessments and everything is consistent so we provide equity across the district.
Awesome. I'm curious, just as you talked about an instructional playbook, what is the instructional practice you're geeking out on right now that you're like, we want this happening in all our classrooms and are trying to get.
I can't believe you asked this because it's making me so happy.
Yay! That's I'll be a teaching and learning nerd over here. So I'm
Yes.
excited to hear what you've got to say.
So right now we are working on what we call set of focus for learning. So we use those, we started with those 8 high impact strategies from Marzano and Hattie, looking at the research of the why and all the things so that we really have a deep understanding of why is it important to put learning intentions and success criteria on the board? Because it's not for me when I walk in, it's for your kids. And so really it's so fascinating because people are, should I say, excited and seeing some change in their kids already, taking ownership of their learning. And that's really what it's all about for me anyway, is the self-efficacy of students. When teachers say my kids just aren't motivated, I push back a little and I say, so how are you trying to motivate them?
Who is
And
that a reflection on in that moment, right? Like,
yes.
and how do you know that?
We talk about the difference between internal and external motivation and what really drives us as human beings. Um, my main geek out is adult learning theory. And, in education, sometimes we always, of course, are focused with kids. And I talk to my coaches about, your main role is to build capacity within teachers and improve student learning outcomes. But it starts with building that capacity with the adult. And it's very different when you become a coach, as you probably know, when you step out of the classroom, you think everybody does what you do.
Surprise.
Believe it or not, that's not the case. If they did, we would be in a different world probably. But yeah, building that, of course, starting with relationships, as I mentioned before, but really, really getting in there with them and understanding their needs. That drives people much more than telling them what to do.
For sure. And it's one of those things, as I moved in, as I shared with you before, I've spent a lot of time in educator prep too. So also love adult learning theory too. And one of the hardest learnings of going from being a teacher to a leader of teachers is that the learning was different. Like you can't approach it the same way that you do with your students. And that takes some time. Sometimes for folks, and some trying things out and some failing and some successes and, just what, like we expect from our students too. And I also love this focus on setting a focus for learning with teachers. It seems so basic, right? But so often we play hide the ball, right? Like if we are always, as teachers, if we're always super clear with kids about where we're taking them, we're much more likely to get there, right? And
Absolutely. So at one point, I was really looking into some things from Priya Parker. I'm not sure if you know who she
I'm
is,
not
but
familiar with buying them.
she wrote a book, I believe it's called The Art of Gathering. And in it, she talks a lot about, if I don't know what I'm going to do, why am I going there in the first place? So I use the analogy for adults that if I'm going to a baby shower, I know what I'm wearing, I know what I'm bringing, and I know what's happening. I know what time of day it's going to be. If I'm going to a gathering with my girlfriends like that, but it's for a bachelorette party, it's going to be a really different party. So it's really important for kids and adults, really, to know what they're going to be experiencing and learning during the time that they're with you. It gives them focus, it gives them direction, and it gives them greater ownership of their learning process in general.
100%. Absolutely love that clarity too, and appreciate hearing that they are already feeling success from it, right? It's very kids come around too, because that is just helps build that momentum over time too. It's great. I'd love to shift to talk a little bit more about literacy. You brought up literacy a little bit earlier. And that's the thing, and on your mark that we care most deeply about is our early readers and how we're setting them up for success for the rest of their lives. So I'm hoping you can start big picture with me and tell me about what your vision is for literacy instruction across Sampson County.
So before I got here, North Carolina went through a transition of really understanding how students learn how to read, going back to the science of reading. So they embarked on an initiative to provide everyone, all teachers in elementary school, all administrators, with significant professional development, 2 years of it, on how kids learn how to read, with all of the pieces of literacy. So I think that process in and of itself was eye-opening. So moving on from there, it was important that we put a couple things in place. So making sure that people have access to high quality instructional resources. That wasn't necessarily here or aligned with that science of reading concepts. And so that needed to be established. So we have gotten that underway. We're looking at some new things that we have some really great success with a specific program for summer camp. And so we're looking at possibly bringing that in for some MTSS support pieces. So while we have our core instruction really tight and the state provides us with some resources there too, we got to make sure that that tiered instruction is really targeted for kids. So the other component, as I spoke about before, are instructional coaches, because for me, PD to practice is a huge piece. And it's nice that I've gotten this professional development, but we know if we don't have coaching and support afterwards, we're really only going to retain about 10-20% of that, right? So accountability is huge. So my principals had to know what they were looking for in classrooms. And coaches needed to provide that specific support. So we are in classrooms constantly observing instruction, then talking about the data from those walkthroughs, actually, those learning walks that we take, letting teachers know, again, that why am I hiding this from them? This is what I'm seeing in the trends. Guys, we're doing great with onset rhyme, but gee whiz, segmenting is not our jam. And so where do we go next as a team, and then differentiating it and individualizing it? The only person that at a school that I know that can do that is a coach. So all of that support that comes in afterwards, that's the piece we're working on right now. So the state of North Carolina offers us an extra position. It's called an early literacy specialist. So in my second year now, we have one, and I'm so excited because I did not have one last year. And their basic function this year, their goal is to work with our second and third grade teachers to really give them the tools for that transition. Because according to our state data, we are dipping when students get to third grade. So we know that second to third grade is that comprehension component that they need to put in place. And so that's where we are as a district right now. And that is our focus. So we have some really, I think, strong components within our instructional playbook that also focus this year. Our other piece that we're doing with Set of Focus is explicit instruction. Because we found that the trends through our learning walks was that teachers did a great job at guided instruction. It was where they were and they felt comfortable there, but they weren't going through all of those motions of gradual release. So students were not receiving that explicit instruction, which goes really hand in hand with setting a focus for learning. Now,
and with what we know about the science of reading, right? And the necessity of making sure that we have that explicit instruction in place.
Exactly. Especially for our most struggling learners. They
sure.
really need to have that. And then, I could keep talking about literacy all day. So stop me when you need me to, but that's where we're headed.
Awesome. Cool. So it sounds like one of the things that's really on your mind, and I'm glad to hear that you've been able to adopt high quality instruction materials. It's as I've talked with different districts and even my own children's district, they're older now, but it's just in the upcoming year that they're getting rid of old debunked curriculum and are moving over to what we know as high quality instructional materials, right? So getting the right tools in front of teachers is a really important part of that. And that also requires change. And change management, because we have a lot of folks who are doing it a different way, because that was what we had assumed. And the research and the, common theories around exactly how we teach kids to read that we now know is just not true. But that's hard to change. And asking teachers to do that kind of change is really, teachers work their butts off. And so honoring that space of where they've come from and having to change models and methods. How have you been seeing them adapt to really this new, because it's not really new, but newer in terms of the state requirement and your work on really aligning with the science of reading?
And to what you were saying, right? We need to unlearn some practices that we had used in the past and relearn in a new way. And as an adult learner, I think that is part of the biggest struggle, because you need to be vulnerable in that space enough to admit that it was not correct. I have some examples that I share with people. When I was a teacher, I taught this thing completely wrong. And I meet kids later that I had when they were in third, fourth, or fifth grade, and I say, I'm so sorry for this. Because it's true, and you feel that internal guilt in teachers who are the most dedicated humans ever. I don't ever want to put them in a position where they're feeling that. So we all have to come to terms with the fact that this is transformational change, and really understand what that looks like, because it's hard. It's hard work that they do, especially when we're dealing with early learning. These are little minds, and we know that the most growth in your mind happens in kindergarten and first grade.
Really? Yep.
Right? What is the ages 2 to 6, I think it is. And so we want to get those kids then, because if we don't, it's going to be a struggle for them down the road. And so we just have really open conversations with our teachers. And I'm really, like I was saying before, I'm really proud of the work our coaches have done, because they've made that space accessible to teachers to say, I'm struggling and I need this. I think that without that self-admittance, I don't feel growth happening.
And that has everything to do with building trusting relationships where folks are safe to be vulnerable and admitting just what you said, right? I don't know what to do. I'm struggling. This is hard. Are all things that are really hard to say out loud, especially if you've been doing something for a long time. So that speaks a ton to those kind of relationships you've been building with your coaches too. That's cool.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. I'd love to spend a little more time talking about struggling readers. I think you had mentioned some state data around starting to see a dip with those second and third graders. What is your vision for the district for how to support those struggling readers, especially in those earliest years?
So I mentioned that we have an ELS now, which
Yay!
so then above that, right? So we are actually talking a lot about a couple of things. One of those is scaffolding, because we want to make sure we're differentiating for kids what that looks like on scaffolding in core instruction, the questions that we ask, even drilling deeper than that. But we also, in addition, are going to begin talking about close reading.
Okay.
We've been planting some seeds here and there, but I was not able to really fully form any kind of real specific support around that until I had that ELS on board.
Uh-huh.
So we are putting together some supports for that. So it's also my opinion that when we do professional development, I don't necessarily want to give this big overview for some people and then them not have supports. So I give that overview to the coaches. Then they differentiate it per their teachers at their school, and it's delivered through that model of PLC and planning. So it's really focused on being job embedded. So they're not doing one more thing, but so with this close reading component, we also have champions for each content area at their schools. So the ELS and the coaches will meet with those champions, and then teachers will then learn from peers. So what does that look like in terms of early literacy? I need kids to have text in front of them. I need them to have productive struggle. I need them to grapple with text and learn that it's not easy and that it's okay. So for early literacy, we need to start comprehension earlier. We are so now swung the other way and focused on our phonics and phonemic awareness and fluency that we're missing the mark on that comprehension. So what does it look like when I first expose a kid to text? Am I giving them that opportunity to just explore it, or am I automatically just going in right away and tackling it? And so we're going to learn more about those layers of what that close reading looks like, having text in front of kids, them interacting with it themselves. Because right now I'm hearing in classrooms a lot of prior knowledge and bringing in those different components, and that is fantastic. We want to see that. But I also need kids with time on text, is what I say. If they don't have, we talk about time on computer-based instruction all the time. But what is the time if you went through an entire day where kids are actually having text in front of them? Right? So, yeah, that's our next steps with where we're going with early literacy and beyond.
It's you bring up an interesting facet that we're also seeing in our work supporting struggling readers right now. As you said, with the refocus on the science of reading, which was right, we've swung all the way in one direction, but then what happens to make sure that we are also balancing comprehension and getting regularly into connected text so that we are practicing those skills that we're learning in authentic ways, right? And that's a challenge too, because we need the text to be right. They have to meet the kids at their levels. They have to be, decodable based on the skills that they've actually been working on and learned. And that those are different for different kids based on their own pace of growth too. So I get how complicated that is and love that focus on making sure that kids are getting in front of text. Because we even have seen in a couple different resources that we're using, the more we are getting kids to practice those in real applications, they're growing more quickly, which is just so exciting to see. I'm curious, when you think about if we think about it in terms of MTSS or RTI, what are your teachers doing for tier 2 and tier 3 intervention?
They're focusing on it. And they're providing that tiered instruction at the level 2 and level 3 I'd say our level 2 is pretty strong here in Sampson. Our coaches are a real big part of that, helping to identify those students, really bring it in. So yes, I would say that part, because there's so many things in North Carolina holding us accountable to do that, that we have lost some in our core instruction. And we're depending on tier 2 to fix it. And we are not focused on the data that's coming out of our core enough to say, is that tiered instruction translating to my core instruction? And if it's not, why? Is the tier 2 what they're supposed to be encountering? Or are we just providing a blanket thing to all students? How is that differentiation coming into play? So right now I'm very much still in that questioning phase, discovery. And what that looks like, because some things are working, right? And I don't ever want to take away all the work that has been done and say, let's just stop doing this altogether, because some things really are working. So I think that it takes a minute to really dive in and figure out the needs of those students on a big scale, rather than just in a school, in a classroom, in a small group. And so what that looks like, we're still kind of defining that in an MTSS realm. But in terms of tier 2, I think my teachers have that going on.
That's awesome. And so tier 2 is all delivered within the classroom by the classroom teacher then, for the most part?
So no, sometimes we do walk to intervention too, especially in those older grades. So they're looking at that data as a whole grade level, rather than just as a class. And they're going to where teacher strengths are. And then they're monitoring, of course, that data every 6 weeks or so to see what the impact has been on student learning. So it's different based on the needs of the kids for sure. But they do look at it in terms of an entire grade level, not just a class at a time. So sometimes there are TAs that are supporting that instruction. I have a coach who does multiple interventions a day because that's what the need is at that school. Because they're really just at that particular school are getting MTSS underway. And when I see my coach doing it and I feel that they're making an impact, I see that model, I'm going to do that too. That makes sense. So we have opportunity culture here. And so we have started with the multi-classroom leader. And she is also a big part of that implementation as well. Because she's in it with them. She's not just their coach, she's a teacher too.
Doing it too. I mean, you just goes to speak about how you all really are all hands on deck, right? It's everybody pitches in whatever ways we need for our kids. That's incredible. What Edie, what do you want to be true 5 years from now about literacy in your district?
That every student can hit second grade and be fluent. That every student that hits third grade can dig into text deeper, and then every student knows their strengths and weaknesses and can talk about them. Where do I still need to grow? And where am I like rocking and rolling? Because the other thing is I don't ever want to hold students back. So on that MTSS vibe, we are not meeting our more advanced learners. And so I talked a lot to our teachers, to our coaches and principals about moving from that deficit mindset to a strength-based mindset. And what are these strengths that our students that have already mastered the content? What do they need next? Because I'm not necessarily going to give them the next grade level up work. I need to make this work more rigorous. And what does that look like? So one of the we're working more with Oh, yeah, I was going to mention some books and things, but some other processes just to develop and build that rigor and understand all the components of it so that teachers aren't saying, yeah, I'm making this more rigorous, and they can't really tell you what that looks like. So we're identifying all that.
Awesome. And if there is a specific tool or resource, please feel free to name that now too. So our listeners can also learn from that too.
We're diving into, it's a newer text called Rigor Unveiled. And Fisher and Fry are really the promoters of that through Corwin. And what that resource does for us is it provides not only a blueprint of what rigor looks like through text, but it also has video connection. So it has videos of teachers actually doing the work. And then there's a coach saying what was good and how they would support this teacher moving forward. And so, so all of our principals, our coaches, and our instructional playbook champions, because we have those too, everybody has a copy or more of those books, and we utilize those throughout the year. We're going really slow. We're diving into the second section right now. I just introduced some pieces to the principals yesterday, so we'll see how that goes, because we got the learning intentions and setting a focus, but we're working more toward that student ownership of their learning.
Awesome. I think there's a through line here in our conversation, and a lot of it is about making expectations clear. From the resources that you're sharing with teachers to what you're expecting them to do with students, to make it clear that clarity around where we're heading is of great value to you and the folks at Sampson now.
Absolutely, because as Brene Brown says, clear is kind.
No doubt.
Yeah. And I say that often. So I think we're simpatico in that for sure.
That's awesome. Well, I have one more question for you, and it's a little bit kind of off topic, Edie, but I'm curious, what are you reading right now?
Oh my gosh. So I'm reading Brene Brown's new book, actually. And it is incredible. So I about a 20-minute drive to work, but in some situations when I'm going to schools, it's a lot longer. So I have audiobooks through Audible, yeah, and so I'm listening to it, and it's one that I've been, taking notes when I stop, and then I know I need to listen to it again. Oh my gosh, chapters 5 through 8 so are like the most spectacular leadership lessons. And so, yeah, don't get me started on this book. It's amazing.
That sounds fantastic, because I didn't even know she had a new book out. And so it's something I'm about to finish another audiobook right now. So I'm going to add this to my list to make sure that I bring in as the next one. That sounds absolutely incredible. Edie, I just want to thank you so much for your time. I'm super excited for the work that you're doing at Sampson and what's possible for kids there, and how the clarity that you're looking to provide for everybody around literacy is really going to, I think, pay huge dividends in the long run.
Hope is not a strategy, but we need to have it to get there.
Right.
So thanks for that.
Correct. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Edie.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the On Your Mark podcast. If today's conversation sparked a question, idea, or story of your own, we want to hear it. Connect with us on LinkedIn or YouTube, or visit onyourmarkeducation.org to discover how we're accelerating early literacy through powerful school partnerships and evidence-based intervention.